Right.
We're going to take you live to the US White House. President Joe Biden's speaking now. It's likely he's going to be talking about a possible ban on Russian oil imports.
This is a move that has strong bipartisan support in Congress and, I believe, in the country. Americans have rallied to support the Ukrainian people and made it clear we will not be part of subsidizing Putin's war. We made this decision in close consultation with our allies and our partners around the world, particularly in Europe, because a united response to Putin's aggression has been my overriding focus, to keep all NATO and all of the EU and our allies totally united. We're moving forward with this ban, understanding that many of our European allies and partners may not be in a position to join us. The United States produces far more oil domestically than all the European countries combined. In fact, we're a net exporter of energy. So we can take this step when others cannot. But we're working closely with Europe and our partners to develop a long-term strategy to reduce their dependence on Russian energy as well. Our teams are actively discussing how to make this happen. And today, we remain united. We remain united in our purpose to keep pressure mounting on Putin and his war machine. This is a step that we're taking to inflict further pain on Putin. But there will be cost as well here in the United States. I said I would level with the American people from the beginning. And when I first spoke to this, I said defending freedom is going to cost. It's going to cost us as well in the United States. Republicans and Democrats understand that. Republicans and Democrats alike have been clear that we must do this. Over the last week, I've spoken with President Zelensky several times to hear from him about the situation on the ground and to consult and continue to consult with our European allies and about U.S. support for Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. Thus far, we've provided more than $1 billion in security assistance to Ukraine. Shipments of defensive weapons are arriving in Ukraine every day from the United States, and we, the United States, are the ones coordinating the delivery of our allies and partners of similar weapons, from Germany to Finland to the Netherlands. We're working that out. We're also providing humanitarian support for the Ukrainian people, both those still in Ukraine and those who have fled safely to a neighboring country. We're working with humanitarian organizations to surge tens of thousands of tons of food, water, and medical supplies into Ukraine, and with more on the way. Over the weekend, I sent Secretary Blinken to visit our border between Poland and Ukraine and to Moldova to see what the situation was firsthand and report back. General Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of our Defense Department, was also in Europe, meeting with his counterparts and allies on NATO's eastern flank to reassure them, those countries bordering Russia, NATO countries, that we will keep our NATO commitment, a sacred commitment of Article 5. The Vice President Harris is going to be traveling to meet with our allies in Poland and Romania later this week as well. I've made it clear the United States will share in the responsibility of caring for the refugees so the costs do not fall entirely on the European countries bordering Ukraine. And yesterday I spoke with my counterparts in France, Germany, and the United Kingdom about Russia's escalating violence against Ukraine and the steps that we're going to take together with our allies and partners around the world to respond to this aggression. We are enforcing the most significant package of economic sanctions in history, and it's causing significant damage to Russia's economy. It has caused Russian economy to, frankly, crater. The Russian ruble is now down to 50%, by 50% since Putin's announced his war. 1 ruble is now worth less than 1 American penny. 1 ruble is less than 1 American penny. And preventing Russia's central bank from propping up the ruble and to keep its value up. They're not going to be able to do that now. We cut Russia's largest banks from the international financial system, and it's crippled their ability to do business with the rest of the world. In addition, we're choking off Russia's access to technology like semiconductors and sap its economic strength and weaken its military for years to come. Major companies are pulling out of Russia entirely without even being asked, not by us. Over the weekend, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they all suspended their services in Russia, all of them. joining a growing list of American and global companies from Ford to Nike to Apple. They've suspended their operations in Russia. The U.S. Stock Exchange has halted trading of many Russian securities. And the private sector is united against Russia's vicious war of choice. The U.S. Department of Justice has assembled a dedicated task force to go after the crimes of Russian oligarchs. And we're joining with our European allies to find and seize their yachts, their luxury apartments, their private jets, and all their ill-begotten gains to make sure that they share in the pain of Putin's war. These, by the way, are giant yachts. You've put some of them in your press. I mean, some of them are, I think I read one was over 400 feet long. I mean, this is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The decision today is not without cost here at home. Putin's war is already hurting American families at the gas pump. Since Putin began his military buildup on Ukrainian borders, just since then, the price of the gas at the pump in America went up 75 cents. And with this action, it's going to go up further. I'm going to do everything I can to minimize Putin's price hike here at home. In coordination with our partners, we've already announced that we're releasing 60 million barrels of oil from our joint oil reserves. Half of that, 30 million, is coming from the United States. And we're taking steps to ensure the reliable supply of global energy. We're also going to keep working with every tool at our disposal to protect American families and businesses. Now, let me say this. To the oil and gas companies and to the finance firms that back them, we understand Putin's war against the people of Ukraine is causing prices to rise. We get that. That's self-evident. But, it's no excuse to exercise excessive price increases or padding profits or any kind of effort to exploit this situation or American consumers, exploit them. Russia's aggression is costing us all, and it's no time for profiteering or price gouging. I want to be clear about what we'll not tolerate, but I also want to acknowledge those firms and oil and gas industries that are pulling out of Russia and joining other businesses that are leading by example. This is a time when we have to do our part and make sure we're not taking advantage. Look, let me be clear about two other points. First, it's simply not true that my administration or policies are holding back domestic energy production. That's simply not true. Even amid the pandemic, companies in the United States pumped more oil during my first year in office than they did during my predecessor's first year. We're approaching a record levels of oil and gas production in the United States, and we're on track to set a record of oil production next year. In the United States, 90% of onshore oil production takes place on land that isn't owned by the federal government. And of the remaining 10% that occurs on federal land, the oil and gas industry has millions of acres leased. They have 9,000 permits to drill now. They could be drilling right now, yesterday, last week, last year. They have 9,000 to drill onshore that are already approved. So let me be clear. They are not using them for production now. That's their decision. These are the facts. We should be honest about the facts. Second, this crisis is a stark reminder to protect our economy over the long term, we need to become energy independent. I've had numerous conversations over the last 3 months with our European friends of how they have to wean themselves off of Russian oil. It's just not tenable. It should motivate us to accelerate the transition to clean energy. This is a perspective that our European allies share, and the future where together we can achieve greater independence. Loosening environmental regulations or pulling back clean energy investment will not lower energy prices for families. But transforming our economy to run on electric vehicles powered by clean energy with tax credits to help American families winterize their homes and use less energy, that will help. And if we do what we can, it will mean that no one has to worry about the price of the gas pump in the future. That'll mean tyrants like Putin won't be able to use fossil fuels as weapons against other nations. And it will make America a world leader, manufacturing and exporting clean energy technologies of the future to countries all around the world. This is the goal we should be racing toward. Over the last 2 weeks, the Ukrainian people have inspired the world. and I mean that in a literal sense. They've inspired the world with their bravery, their patriotism, their defiant determination to live free. Putin's war has caused enormous suffering and needless loss of life of women, children, everyone in Ukraine, both Ukraine and, I might add, Russians. Ukrainian leaders, as well as leaders around the world, have repeatedly called for a ceasefire, for humanitarian relief, for real diplomacy. But Putin seems determined to continue on his murderous path, no matter the cost. Putin's now targeting cities and has been targeting cities and civilians, schools, hospitals, apartment buildings. Last week, he attacked the largest nuclear power plant in Europe with an apparent disregard for the potential of triggering a nuclear meltdown. He has already turned 2 million Ukrainians into refugees. Russia may continue to grind out its advance at a horrible price, but this much is already clear. Ukraine will never be a victory for Putin. Putin may be able to take a city, but he'll never be able to hold the country. And if we do not respond to Putin's assault on global peace and stability today, the cost of freedom and to the American people will be even greater tomorrow. So we're going to continue to support the brave Ukrainian people as they fight for their country. And I call on Congress to pass the $12 billion Ukraine assistance package that I have asked them for of late. Ukrainian people are demonstrating by their physical courage that they are not about to just let Putin take what he wants. That's clear. They'll defend their freedom, their democracy, their lives. And we're going to keep providing security assistance, economic assistance, and humanitarian assistance. We're going to support them against tyranny, oppression, violent acts of subjugation. People everywhere, and I think it's maybe even surprised some of you all, people everywhere are speaking up for freedom. When the history of this war is written, Putin's war on Ukraine will have left Russia weaker and the rest of the world stronger. May God bless all those heroes in Ukraine. And now I'm off to Texas. Thank you very, very much. I know there's a lot of questions. I know there's a lot of questions, but there's a lot more that has to be made clear, and I'm going to hold on that until we get more information. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're watching Al Jazeera. We've been bringing you live pictures from the U.S. White House where President Joe Biden has been speaking and confirming that the United States is willing to move ahead with a ban on Russian oil imports without the participation of allies in Europe. He was talking also about the humanitarian aid that the U.S. had been supplying to Ukraine, as well as the military support. He did say that he had said right at the start that this defending freedom, he said, was going to cost. And of course, that has been reflected in the prices of fuel that we have seen at American fuel pumps, as well as other parts of the world. I want to bring in Kimberly Halkett. She's our White House correspondent. Perhaps, Kimberly, in many ways, no surprise, but definitely the U.S. prepared to go it alone in this instance.
Yeah, but it's easier for the United States to go it alone. And you heard the U.S. president acknowledging that. And I'll sort of explain why. When you look at how much the United States imports in terms of Russian oil, it's about 700,000 barrels a day. That's about 10% of the nation's energy supply. Contrast that with Europe, where they are importing about 4 million barrels a day. And you realize why there might be some European nations that are somewhat more reticent to put in place this oil embargo, Russian oil embargo, in contrast to the United States. Now, still, the White House was slow to put this one in place. And you heard there the U.S. president saying that it was something that he spoke about with the Ukrainian leader, Vladimir Zelensky, on multiple occasions. In fact, we know that he, in fact, pled with the U.S. president to put this in place because there would be a punishing impact on the Russian economy. And this is something that the U.S. president, although he put in place a number of economic sanctions, did not put this one in place until we saw a series of sanctions go into effect. And the reason is because of the impact to the U.S. consumer. And you heard the U.S. president acknowledging that there's going to be pain at the gas pump for the American consumer. Right now, U.S. consumers on average are paying about $4 plus for a gallon of gasoline or petrol. That's up from about $2.70 a year ago, but that is expected to climb significantly. You heard there the U.S. president saying that this could go up by at least 75 cents a gallon. That's a lot for an American, given the fact that right now Americans are paying for ordinary consumer goods some of the highest prices they've seen in terms of inflation, given the fact that inflation is the highest we've seen in about 40 years. So this could come at a price for the U.S. president politically. Still, this is something that the U.S. president underscored in his remarks that he believes is worthy of doing, because in his argument, what the point he's trying to make is this is all about freedom. And the message has to be sent to the Russian president that, look, you could take a city, but you're not going to hold the country. And these are about American values and standing up for American values, and those are worth defending. And that is why the U.S. president believes this is something that he is willing to do, and he's made the case to the American public. So whether or not the American public is going to be on board is still unclear. I guess we might even have to wait till the November congressional elections for that. But we should point out that the U.S. president made the argument that both Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill are behind this. In fact, they had their own legislation going to put in place sanctions on Russian energy. So it appears that on the heels of that effort by Congress, the White House has gone ahead and done their own.
I'm seeing that the U.S. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer is quoted as saying that lawmakers are apparently discussing ways to ease the impact on prices of a Russian energy ban. That's going to be key in the U.S., isn't it? Because, as you said, the U.S.'s exposure, if you like, to the Russian oil energy market is fairly limited, but Americans are still feeling the pinch of that. Trying to find ways of alleviating it, balancing out those high prices at the pumps is going to be key to the administration.
Yeah, and we did hear from the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, in the last week or so, and he did discuss that there are some things that can be done to mitigate that. One of them is raising interest rates, but it is a delicate dance in terms of trying to ease some of this pressure. And there's only so much that you can do. And so we're going to watch to see what is going to be done. But the bottom line in all of this is that American consumers are going to be paying higher prices for gasoline. And in some ways, that's not entirely a bad thing in the eyes of the Biden administration. There is this argument that there is this feeling that too many Americans are driving. There is this feeling that they want to see more people purchasing electric vehicles. The problem is that the infrastructure isn't in place for a lot of these electric vehicles just yet. And also the wages haven't kept up with inflation in the United States. So the goals are ambitious, but the problem is the infrastructure isn't quite there to support some of those ambitious goals. That's going to be the problem for Congress to sort out. It's going to take some time, and it's probably going to be messy in the interim.
Kimberly, thank you very much indeed. White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett in Washington, D.C. Let's bring our diplomatic editor, James Bays, in. He's joining us from Paris. The point being made there, of course, that the Blinken administration is quite clearly aware that they're going to have to go this themselves, because in Europe and in the UK and in other allies, there is a certain reticence to making such a dramatic move.
Yeah, there is. I'll come to the UK in a moment because we have some news on the UK that's just come in. But yes, the EU would find it very hard to do this. The 27 countries of the EU, 30% of their energy comes from Russia. So it would, and we're still pretty cold temperatures in some parts of Europe. So you'd have the effect on consumers. You'd then also have the effect on businesses. This could already, President Biden's talking about the hurt that there'll be for Americans. But clearly there's a danger, if you were to do this in the European countries, of pushing the world further towards recession. That's the situation in many European countries. Of course, the UK no longer part of the 27-member EU. And in the last few minutes, Kwasi Kwarteng, who is the business secretary in Prime Minister Johnson's government, has tweeted that the UK is going to follow the US by the end of 2022. They'll phase out the import of Russian oil and oil products by the end of the year. It says those imports make up 8% of UK demand, so far less than is in the EU and the EU countries. With regard to gas, he says he's coming up with a plan, but he wants to end import of gas as well. So the UK, it seems, is signalling that it's going to do something similar, but it's very hard, I think, for many of the European Union countries, and particularly for Germany, to follow with this now. Although we've heard from senior European leaders, just speaking again on Twitter in the last couple of hours, Ursula von der Leyen, who is the president of the European Commission, saying it's something that Europe is going to have to do. It was going to have to do anyway, changing its energy supplies because of the environment, to go more green. It's now going to have to speed up that process.
And throughout all of this, President Putin has, President Blinken has been, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been having meetings with French President Emmanuel Macron. We understand the talks are still going on. France, of course, being one of the biggest economies in the European Union. Just talk us around what is happening there.
Well, I think this is part of the very constant diplomacy that's going on to keep everyone in the loop. And that's why the US Secretary of State has been on a tour. He went to those countries closest to Ukraine that are taking in refugees. He's then been to the Baltic countries, those that are near Russia and fear Russia, those that are EU members and NATO members. Mr. Blinken is now with his French counterpart, Jean-Yves Le Drian, and he will be seeing in about 15 minutes' time President Macron for a courtesy visit to him to keep in the loop of what the French are doing. And the French, of course, and the Germans have been doing quite a lot. President Macron in recent days has talked to President Putin. That was a very negative conversation. They talked for a long time, and we were told by officials nothing very positive came out of it. Perhaps more interesting for the US Secretary of State will be his news on what we've been told about was another recent call. This was a video conference between the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and President Macron and President Xi of China. China, because it has a partnerships with Russia and is certainly not taking sides in this in the same way that the NATO and EU countries are. It's very much seen by most observers to be more on Russia's side. So China, because of that, has real influence. And I think we're not being told a lot about what was said, other than they're trying to work particularly on the humanitarian front and working towards a ceasefire. But what will be told and briefed to the US Secretary of State privately perhaps will give us more or give them more on the situation behind the scenes, the Chinese position. And China is a country that has real leverage here.
And so diplomatic editor James Bray is bringing us up to date with the movements of US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the talks that he's been having. James, thank you very much indeed. I want to go to Gabriel Elizondo. He's live for us in New York. Gabriel, just talk us through what kind of response this oil ban may produce, because it has been expected, hasn't it?
It has been, but certainly this was an announcement about oil, an unprecedented announcement, quite frankly, about U.S. limiting imports of Russian oil, and it is going to have an immediate effect on the oil markets. We've already seen Brent crude, which is the benchmark, if you will, already reach about $139 Sunday into Monday, the highest price for a barrel of Brent crude since 2008. Right now, it's come down a little bit to about $1.27, $1.30 a barrel, but that's still very high. Now the question is going to become, what are we going to see it going to in the coming hours and days? And according to most analysts here on Wall Street, they were predicting around 145, 150. Now we've got J.P. Morgan, based on this new information, predicting that by the end of 2022, the end of this year, we could see Brent crude reaching up to $185 a barrel. Again, that's going to have direct impacts on consumers around the world. Now, Biden announced there that what he announced previously, that the U.S. would be releasing, with about 30 allies, about 60 million barrels out of the strategic reserves. Biden is announcing that because he wants to calm the markets a little bit. But here on Wall Street, it's not going to do that. And that's because 60 million barrels released from the strategic reserves is, quite frankly, nothing. The world consumes per day, about 100 million with an M, barrels of oil a day. So the 60 million just simply will not be enough to calm the markets and bring down the prices.
Yeah, and President Biden in his speech there was referring to the fact that many, as he described it, private or international companies have been pulling out, credit card companies, but also the Shell Energy Company, General Electric, both speaking today. What kind of impact is that having on the markets generally?
As Biden was speaking, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was in the green. It was about 200 points in the green, meaning in positive territory. As Biden was speaking, it went into the red. And now Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500, NASDAQ are all now completely in the red. The market is getting hit very hard. Biden was talking about how these sanctions were affecting the Russian economy. People have been predicting how it would spread to the global economy, and now that is exactly what we have been seeing, and that is now more of what we are going to be seeing. The S&P 500 has its worst day since October of 2020. On Monday, the Dow fell 800 points on Monday, and the NASDAQ dropped almost 4% on Monday as well, off 20% from its November high. The big picture here is this. It's complicated, but it's not just oil. It's not just the markets. It's multiple things. It's the sanctions. It's the supply chain issues that we continue to have globally, inflation concerns, inflation the highest rate that it's been in the U.S. for over a decade, and commodity prices going up as well. Hanging over all of this, of course, is the war, and now the oil sanctions. As one limited of oil coming into the U.S. Add all of this up now, and that's why you have Wall Street and the markets around the world really reacting the way they are reacting, very much going into the red. As one trader said, this is very much not just one issue we're dealing with. It's really a perfect storm of 4 or 5, now maybe even 6 issues all coalescing at one time.
Gabriel, thank you very much indeed. Gabriel Elizondo bringing us up to date with what's going on in the markets, live for us in New York.